Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Lindsay Sisters podcast. Tonight, we are going to talk about codependency as our first topic tonight. So, I just want to kind of run down what codependency is. So, I'm just going to give you the definition of. So, codependency is noted to be emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically one who requires support on account of an illness or an addiction. So, Jasmine, do you want to kind of give us your perspective on codependency, your take?
So I found a couple things online that made codependency a little bit easier to understand because I was taught that, or told, not necessarily taught, but told that I was codependent. And so when you're codependent, you tend to put yourself last. You're constantly seeking approval from other people and you try to manipulate situations to your benefit. Because the cycle of codependency typically often repeats itself, it can really be hard to break the cycle without some type of help, whether it be from like a counselor, a life coach, guide, or whoever you decide to help you with this. um, Codependency typically comes from childhood trauma, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. Um, I do think it could come from a traumatic experience, maybe in adulthood, but it typically stems from something that happened when you were a child. Um, so it happens from something that's unaddressed. Let me say that because we all go through stuff. But if it's unaddressed, it's typically where things like codependency, depression, and um, things of that nature fester and grow. It can usually start with something like abuse, neglect, some type of domestic violence, divorce, maybe in your childhood that you might have dealt with, a lot of arguing and fighting, stuff like that. And codependency can have you feeling like you need to seek out a partner to love. But they're based off of feelings of insecurity and inadequacy within ourselves. That's why when you hear people say things like, um, happiness is comes from within, it really is true because no matter what type of situation you end up in, whether it be your dream job, um, your dream guy or dream girl, your dream car, whatever the situation may be, you still feel like something's missing or you still keep pushing to move forward for to pull something else into your life because it starts from within first. um, there's a lot of different ways um, that you can look at to know if you're codependent or not. And the very first one that I realized was people pleasing. And it tends you tend to be a person that's constantly always pleasing other people, even when you know it's harmful to yourself. Like someone asks you to do something, you know it's not good for you, you don't really want to, but you still say yes anyway because you're trying to make them happy. You're trying to please them. Um, you typically lack boundaries. Anybody could say anything, do anything to you, and you'll still typically be around. You'll still treat them the same, even though you know it hurt and you know it's not something that they should have been doing to you. You typically lack self esteem, or it's extremely poor. Like you're not really taking care of yourself properly. You don't look at yourself as others do. Um, you have you could have poor communication skills. You're not able to communicate properly or in an effective way where people can typically understand you and what it is that you may need or want. Um, and lack of self image pretty much goes with the same as self esteem. Um, so, yeah. Anybody else?
I agree with you on that part. I know it comes from certain things, especially stemming back to the past, rather it be childhood, um, early adolescence, whatever. Because I know for me, codependency, it was abandonment for me. Um, and abandonment issues have stemmed back since I was a young kid, which of course, like you're aware. So that was always something for me because I was always used to it was like a cycle. You're used to people coming into your life and then they go out. They come into your life and then they go out. And it's kind of like you have that thing where you're trying to hold on to some people, but you can't do that. And that was something that I realized too was like codependency came from abandonment at a young age. When you experience that, you want someone there, they're not there, and then so it's like okay, when other people kind of come into you, it's like you want them to still be there. And normally, that it does trickle into relationships, good or bad. You try to find your way to see the better side of it. Even though you're seeing the signs of it, okay, obviously there's something there, but it's like it's bad for you, but you find yourself reeling yourself back in anyway. Like you don't want to walk away from that. And so for me, isolation was a big part of me dealing with that. I started to just let me isolate myself. And that was one of those things because you can isolate yourself away from other people because of your codependency as a way to kind of stop doing that. Like, let me just not be around whoever. Like, let me just spend more time by myself. Not that I don't enjoy spending time by myself because I do. I recharge on my own, not with people, but it does come a point where that isolation can be a little too long. And so then it starts to affect you too. So if you're like a person that isolates a lot and then you get into a relationship, codependency is bound to happen because you're not used to being around people for a long periodically time or every day or every other day or every other week. So when you do finally invite someone in, that codependency kind of strikes up in there. And another for me with codependency was I didn't have good communication. The way I would communicate was through anger a lot of the time and not a sense of calmness. Whereas, someone else, they're more calm with it, trying to resolve an issue or conflict, whatever. But for me, it was like my only way of knowing was, yeah, I'm gonna yell because that's just how I express myself. But then when you kind of start recognizing those signs of that, it's like you kind of have to pump the brakes, stop doing that, find a better way to communicate. Your side is not always going to be the better side to go with when discussing situations, especially pertaining to relationship, because communication is key on both sides. But in a relationship, you cannot have one person who is a good communicator while the other person lacks communication skills. So, I mean, that's my take on it. Like I said, abandonment and bad communication. Those were two things that I realized that was an issue for me. And so, definitely figuring out how to do that, I would suggest, like I said, therapy, counseling, um, even with your peers, someone who you can talk to, who you can trust, that can kind of help you with that. But if it's not working for you dealing with it on your own, I would definitely suggest that. So that's my take on that. Ron or Carlos, do one of y'all want to go in and give your opinion on how does codependency look for males?
Can you all hear me? Nod your head if you can. Okay, it's like, all right. The audio's messed up on this end from you guys, but anyhow, um, codependency for me started when I was younger. It was also abandonment, as you stated, and the issue with that was it was, you know, what we don't speak on is a lot of it is parental issues, whether that's mommy or daddy issues. Um, as you know, Jazz stated, it could be something from a divorce or witnessing domestic violence, and the failure of those relationships is one of those things that we don't get to deal with. So a lot of times when that divorce happens or you see domestic violence, you know, you're a victim of it as a child. We never talk about the children being the victims as well. Um, and that creates a lot of traumas. And with that, those feelings of inadequacy, those feelings of um, insecurity because you couldn't feel secure at home. And so it's kind of difficult for you to feel secure in the world. You know what I mean? Your home is a small place in a big world. And I'm just speaking from experience. And so then it comes with um, the codependency issues become when you're trying to find that partner to love and you're trying to keep them happy and you're trying to do all these things. And in the midst of all that, you're continuing to lose a piece of yourself. You never found yourself. You never took the time to find yourself. So after, I was married before and I got divorced and I spent years going to counseling and years being single and getting to know who I was because I had noticed that I spent all of my 20s in a relationship and it was two relationships and they both failed. And so I'm like, the common denominator is me. And so what do I need to do? I need to do the work and figure out what I done wrong. Why do I keep picking the same person with a different name? And so the person that I was picking was codependency. The person that I was picking was toxic. The person that I was picking reflected how I felt on the inside, the unfinished work that I had yet to even begin to tackle. And so I didn't realize that until I went to counseling and worked the program. And then I figured out it stemmed back to something that happened when I was 6 years old that happened to me, a trauma. And I mean, that's just one of the many traumas that I experienced, but it's not blaming parents or anything like that. But it's just, again, we've spoken on this before. You get into relationships and we don't properly vet. And so then once we start having procreating and having these children, and then we're in relationships that we shouldn't have been in. Now we're having kids with people that, and people say, children are a blessing. Yeah, they can be, but a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with misbehaving of our children, and then all hell breaking loose is because we did things out of the natural order. And so I feel like that all comes back to the codependency issue because you didn't feel good enough for mom or dad or your siblings or whomever, and then now you don't feel good with your partners and your friends because codependency is also those friends too. It's not just those significant others. And so now you're just a shell of a person out here trying to please people, and you're a chameleon. You're not real to yourself. And I always say it's better to be real with yourself than to be a dream for somebody else. So that's my take on codependency. What helped me was counseling for me to figure out what I was dealing with, what I needed to deal with, what work I needed to do. And that's what helped me kind of navigate that realm. And I don't feel like I'm codependent anymore. I know I'm not. I'd rather be alone than and have my peace than to be in some, being a non 50-50 situation. And I'm not saying, we'll go into that later, but some people don't believe relationships are 50-50. They mostly should be. Now there are days where I'm gonna have to put in 80 and you only got 20 to give. It's days where I might have to give 95 and you only got 5 to give because you're not feeling well. That's different than you just doing whatever the hell you want to do all the time. But that's my take on it.
Carlos.
Okay, great point, everybody. Definitely, definitely was something that all those points, were great. Especially from the experience. For me, I would say that that part for me, because I was reading up on it here. Um, I think where my codependency was more like vouching, like for people, because you didn't really want to throw them under the bus or whatnot, and so it was like buying them time to to do better for themselves. Um, whether they was on drugs or or because of their acts or whatever. Because mainly I come from a life of a whole lot of mistakes, a whole lot of things that I've done, and I wanted to uh, be accepted or whatnot. So it's like you accepting that person, but even when people notice these different characteristics, you like just making certain kind of excuses for that to give that person that room to change, or you try to speak positive about it, you know. So it was just a more so like just more like an exaggerated sense of responsibility for the action of others. Um, I made a lot of excuses for people when they were really, jacked up, screwed up. But that was just me having a big heart. I tend to have it over the years, and it cost me, you know, because I just have a heart to give a real, I'm a very genuine person. I don't have a motive. Most people have motives and stuff, and I don't have a motive. So it's like when I do it from my heart, and I'm just a person that really tries to believe in the good in everybody, but sometimes you can get led away with that, um, and just being so um, uh, just overly helping people, stuff like that. I'm big on that. I like to help people. I like to be dependent upon. I'm a giver, but never really received a lot. And no, it's not that part where I fear being alone. I'm practically alone all my life. I mean, I'm the third child of seven children, and we all, all of us had different fathers or whatnot. Three set of different fathers, which me being the middle child, and so I was like the only one with a different dad from all the rest of them shared a father together. But me, I was that only one. So, you know, I isolation has always been my life, you know. So that it wasn't because of that. I kind of got over that part long ago as far as being an abandoned. And speaking on it now, it may have its effects, that could be part of my reason for being codependent. Um, but I can say it did carry over into relationships where, I mean, I was the man. Like I cook, I clean, because I was trained by my mother to do that, um, and I work. You know, never been the one that kind of depended on a woman. Never felt like I could, and it wasn't because I wanted, power. I don't even look at it like that. You make more money than me, okay, great. I mean, we under the same roof. We gonna make it. You know what I'm saying? But it was more so me being just who I am. As a man, I wasn't taught to be able to depend on a woman. You know, so like receiving gifts and all that was foreign to me. I was used to giving them. So when it came, it was more like wow. So to have that, I can say that I kind of when women were like certain women were like that giving to me, I I just didn't know how to receive it because it never was given like that. You know, it was always me being the initiator, the giver, the one with all the energy. Well, later in life, that has been an effect on my life because now it's like, dang, you didn't even accept the ones that would, be there. So I could say that I was codependent in that area with ones I was in relationship with, just being the person that always was doing it, and they just, they would just kick back and just let you do it. You cook, okay. You clean, okay. I can clean better than most women, like literally. I can't say I'm just the greatest cook. I do enough, but just to get to that point where I was at, even in that, I made excuses for people,
So
and they was really
basically,
messed up.
a safety blanket. It's a lot. This I think that's what a lot of the codependency is a safety blanket. It's a safety blanket that you don't want to let go. It's kind of like being attached to a toy. You don't want to let it go. You don't want to let it out of your sight. If you're gonna be, it's it can't be away from you too long because you're reaching for that safety blanket. It's what you know, what you're used to because of a created pattern. Fun fact, I had a codependency on Barney, not the show, but the doll. I mean, well, I don't know. It was the talking Barney. If you were born in the 90s, you probably had one. It was, about me. And I had a huge codependency. I couldn't go anywhere without Barney. Barney was my comforter in dealing with a lot of my traumas as a kid. And so the day that we parted, I didn't know we were parting because Barney would have been with me. So I had to wean myself off of that. I don't really know what I did, but yeah, it can be like that, because like I said, a lot of times you have a person, like for me, I was more passive aggressive. I had more of a dominant personality, and naturally I do. So it happens like that. Jasmine, did you want to add something back in there? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add that codependency is um, it's an emotional and a behavioral condition that literally affects your ability to be able to have a healthy and mutually satisfying relationship. Like basically what I'm saying is there's no way to be codependent and to have a healthy relationship at the same time. Like you can't do it because codependency, especially in a relationship, is extremely toxic, and it's more so toxic to the person who is struggling with the codependency. And I speak from experience when I say this. um it is damaging as hell to be codependent and be in a relationship. And um just like y'all, abandonment was part of the reason how I turned codependent, but it was also missing that emotional aspect growing up. Like when you have hard parents that are not as nurturing and loving, you tend to look outside of the family. You tend to look outside of your parents to find that love that you feel like you're missing, and that's where the codependency starts. And then once you find someone to reciprocate that love back to you that you wanted, now it's like what you were saying, like it becomes a blanket, a safety net. You want to hold on to it forever. You don't ever want to let it go. And that's when it starts to become toxic because that person can no longer be themselves around you because they have to feel like they have to cater to your needs because you feel the need to control what they do in order for
Yep.
you to feel okay within yourself and to feel comfortable. And I found myself at the lowest point when I finally had to realize that it wasn't the other person that was necessarily tripping. Now, granted, nobody's perfect and we both had flaws and issues, but I had to realize that I was codependent and it was tearing me up because, and what I was saying to my counselor at that time was a rational person. What I'm upset about right now, a rational person will be able to rationalize this and be okay with it. However, I, on the other hand, I feel like my heart been snatched out of my chest and there was absolutely no reason for me to feel this way. And I could say that in that moment I was blessed to realize that because some people don't. And in these codependent relationships, you tend to stick in relationships that are one-sided or emotionally abusive or destructive. And you have to realize that too on both ends, because as the person who is not codependent, who is with someone who's codependent, well, now I got to stunt my own growth because you're not comfortable. Now I'm not happy anymore in this situation and I'm ready to go. And that codependent person is like, go where? Codependency has been activated at that point and it just becomes a whole mess. So my suggestion, or what I was doing, was I had a life coach. Uh, I actually had multiple counselors, and at first I was really ashamed to admit that I was doing counseling literally about 5 days a week, but I had three different counselors. on top of a life coach, on top of taking random classes I was finding online, reading different books, listening to affirmations. Like I became desperate to get out of that space because it was literally breaking me down and stealing my peace and my joy. Like I couldn't, it got to a point where I couldn't function properly anymore with being codependent. And I think the first thing people should do is one, understand what codependency is. Because people will run around and be like, oh, I'm codependent, and not really know what that means. Understand what it means. Understand that it is very, very toxic. Understand that if you keep going the way that you're going and you don't deal with these traumas, it could literally end you in a behavioral hospital, or worse, committing suicide, because you're so far attached from yourself that you put yourself in a situation where you spiral out of control. And I've done that too. So, you know, understand it and identify your patterns. Figure out what it is in those relationships and in those situations that start to trigger codependent feelings. And then set some boundaries for yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be for the other person, but for yourself. And then get some support. Beating codependency is not something you could do alone. You need some help. Even if you don't get a life coach or a counselor, prayer, if you believe in a higher power, to keep you grounded in the process of being able to remove your feelings from that situation and be able to think and act rationally to go forward. That was pretty much it.
Can I say one
Okay,
quick thing?
well, go ahead. I'm sorry. I know.
I like that. Um, and I agree with all of you. And it's dope that everyone was able to open up and share their personal aspect of it. One last thing I wanted to say too is a lot of the codependent situations that we're in is learned behaviors. As we spoke about the household and growing up in adolescence and preteens and childhood traumas, if you sit and you watch, they say, statistics show, like Jazz spoke about domestic violence. It shows in statistics that, a child that grows up in that house, um, the girl is going to typically be taught and breeded to become a victim of domestic violence, and the boy is going to be taught to become the abuser. And so you start to look at how many times mommy goes back to him, to daddy or her boyfriend or whoever it is that's the abuser. And as a boy, you're learning to become the abuser because you're like, oh, this is what men do. This is what women do. As a girl, that they're being taught, hey, so okay, so, you see your mom getting abused. And then it's like, okay, well, he loves her though, or she keeps going back. And, when a parent is making excuses for the abuse of whatever kind, whether it's a dad abusing and beating the hell out of their children or molesting or whatever, those codependent, it was, we were talking about traumas from that time. Those unresolved issues is people want what goes on in this house to stay in this house, and, ride or die and all of those things. And we don't even realize that we're hurting our children and setting them up to go through the same exact traumas and drama that we're going through because we didn't properly deal with it, or we weren't adults enough to say, everybody want to call themselves a grown ass man or a grown ass woman because they pay bills or they have a job. But everybody's grown until it's time to really communicate their true feelings without mincing words, without saying, let's be real. When it comes to the truth, a lot of people are childish. If that relationship isn't working, and I'll be honest, like I said, I'm divorced. Why? Because that relationship was not working. We tried counseling through my job. We tried counseling through her job. I was in ministry at the time. I was serving. I was pressured to be married. And I did it. I was obedient to the pastors that I was under at the time and all that stuff because I wasn't gonna stop having sex. I wasn't. So I mean, that's what it was. It's who I was with, and she was pregnant, and it was just like, oh, okay, you got to do this. This looks bad, and I'm just being honest and being transparent with y'all. And what I'm saying is, when I'm really trying and I'm getting into the spiritual realm of things, we wasn't evenly yoked. You know what I'm saying? And we weren't matched. And so that wasn't who I was supposed to be with. And so again, I prayed and I prayed and I felt bad about the divorce piece. But what good is it for me? It's punishing her because I don't even like you. I don't even want to be with you. And it's punishing me because she same. I don't like you. I don't want to be with you either. You see what I'm saying? And so instead of us again going back to the properly vetting that we spoke about, and then I know Carlos has spoke about, being in the truth and being honest with yourself, and that's where a lot of we can alleviate a lot of the codependent issues that and create new victims for our children, and you know what I'm saying, by just properly vetting ourselves first. Know who the hell you are before you jump into a relationship, and then two, know who the hell you're with. Granted, people change and people can be chameleons, but if you really are in tune with your spirit of discernment is going to let you know what's right, and not what's almost right, but what's right. But that's all I have on it. Thank y'all.
Okay, so that was what we had for our take of codependency. Um, Let us know what you thought about codependency. Are you struggling with any codependency issues? Have you recognized if you have any codependency issues or someone that you're dealing with, whether it be, again, a significant other, a friend, whoever? Hopefully, this can give you a little more insight on what that means, and so that you can kind of figure out how you can help yourself with that. And just let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you all for watching.